Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Isabel Lopez. I'm the digital organizer for We're All America, and I'm going to be hosting today's episode of Refugee Matters. Refugee Matters is a podcast by We're All America that focuses on uplifting the stories of refugees, immigrants, and asylees, and having important conversations about the futures and well beings of our community. To wrap up Black History Month, we wanted to have an episode to have a in-depth and nuanced conversation about what the Black immigrant experience in this country looks like. And we have Amran Osman, a Somali immigrant and the executive director of Generational Noor, joining us, as well as Djamal Diouf, asylum seeker from Cameroon and a program analyst for Mobile Pathways. So without further ado, I want to jump right into the conversation. So we were talking before the podcast started, we were talking a little bit about the fact that Blackness looks very different depending on where you come from and on different parts of the world. So Djamal, I would love to hear in your case how your experience of being a Black man and racism changed from when you lived in Cameroon to when you came to the US.
First of all, thank you so much for having me and my friend on like the platform. And I mean, I would jump like directly to your question. I would say that it's only when I moved to the United States that I honestly discovered like racism, because as a black African living in Cameroon, I mean everybody is black, and people of like other colors that we have in Cameroon are like I would say we don't we I didn't know what racism was before I moved like to the US, like to be very honest. And when I moved to the US, gradually I started experiencing this I started like having like this like altercation and experience like this like different things every time that I was like trying to move forward, even in my personal life or in my immigration journey. um, what can I take as a very useful like example? For example, there is like we have this like cultural like difference, right? And even the way we express like ourselves and the way we like hold like ourselves in public, that is very different from the way people behave here in the US. And sometimes it's very hard for people to understand, and when they don't understand, ignorance starts getting like more space, and that is when you start experiencing this like this racism that I've like never experienced like before. I remember one day I was walking in the park like everybody else, and I saw this like family of like a white male with his two daughters. I mean, my reaction as a person, as a human being, was to smile and say hi to them, but the way they reacted towards me was very scary. Like, I mean, I could see like the man like holding his kind of like creating like a shield, protecting his two daughters. Meanwhile, he didn't know me. He didn't know who I am. He didn't like that person has had no idea of who I was. But just because of the color of my skin, just because of the way I look, I was considered as a threat. And for me, that was I went home that night and I was profoundly shocked, because again it was a new feeling, it was a new experience. It was like something that I've never ever had to encounter when I was like living back in Cameroon. But now here I am in this new country faced with, I mean, multiple like challenges, and I have to add on top of that, on top of my immigration like challenges, I have to add this problem of like racism. That is like a little bit about my experience, and I'll give you back the floor.
Thank you for sharing, Jamal. I know that a lot of people listening are definitely going to relate to your experience and what you have been through. Amran, in your case, you came to the US as a young girl, so you sort of grew up being racialized. And I'm really curious to know how the experience that you've had has differed from your elders that maybe are more similar to Jamal in the case that they came from a place a black majority country where everyone looked like them, and suddenly they were facing racism for the first time in their lives when they were older.
I think, especially the generation that had to come here, especially coming from war, coming from spaces where they were unsafe. When it came to racism, it was more so of a, okay, I have to deal with it. I have to deal with this because it's how I'm going to survive. It. I think growing up, racism was more so normalized, where if somebody was racist, it was like, okay, um, there they they are again, where you didn't feel comfortable speaking up because it was like, who am I to speak up in a space that I fled to, and this is not my country, this is not the space that I'm from. So I think, like, as I was younger, I would notice like my elders or the people around me be like, oh, just don't say anything, just don't react, just keep going. But then as I grew older, it was like, okay, this is wrong, and I have to speak up, because if I don't speak up, nobody's going to speak up for me. So I realized generationally it's been different, where the younger generation is more likely to speak up when it comes to racism or racist acts. Like, growing up within like the school system, we would always be pulled out of class and be told to take the access test, which is like an ELL test, but you have to take it because you speak another language at home, which, even if you were born here, even if English is your first language, just because somebody at home is speaking another language, you have to take that test. And you're being taken out of class in front of everybody else. And you're missing class time, which affected so many youth. And then now you think of it, and it's like, a lot of the kids now that are growing up are like, why am I taking this? And now they're speaking up. But then as I grew up, it was basically, oh, we have to do that. We have to do it again. It was just normalized. So just seeing that now that we have been in this space and we've been in this country, this is our, like, it's a country made up of immigrants, and this country was built by immigrants. So at the end of the day, it's our country too. So we shouldn't be talked to in a disrespectful manner or have to deal with racism at the end of the day. So I think people are realizing now within this generation that they have to speak up and they have to talk about it. But growing up, it was more so normalized, like, oh, just let it go. It happens. So just seeing like the shift in generations, where people are boycotting, people are going out into spaces, to speaking up and being like, this is wrong, this is something that shouldn't be done, or having to have those like conversations. Like when I was in college, I put together a panel because there was racism going on, and people were like, oh, this was happening, but we were just brushing it under the rug, we weren't talking about it. So just kind of seeing like the shift of generations and like the shift of people talking about it from people not highlighting it as much has been very interesting.
Thank you for sharing that, Amran. It's always really interesting for me to look at social problems that, we all experience, but the reality is that we experience it so differently based on the generations that we have. And what you're saying about younger people, like Gen, Gen Z, feeling that, we have a voice that we can use to advocate for social change, so important. And I definitely relate to that in the immigration advocacy space. Um,
Mom said he wanted to add
Yeah,
something else.
like so sorry like to interrupt, but I really would love to like add this altercation that I had, because I really feel like it, like I mean it relates to like black Americans, and I mean a lot of people like can relate to this like story. So I remember, I mean, I just arrived to the United States and I was just released from detention, and I was in Menlo Park with my godparents in California. So I went to a store. I mean, I won't mention like the name of the store, but I went to a store to get like some groceries. But apparently, there were some people who were stealing in the store. So, but just because I was in that store as a black man, I mean, I was the only like black person in the store. For some reason, the manager of that store called the police and basically profiled me. So like here I am in the store going to the like the checkout area to like check out like my stuff, and the police officer walks towards me and he's asking about like the whereabout of like the other people who apparently like allegedly like stole something from the store. And I respond very politely to the police officer, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm here for my groceries and this is what I'm here for. And the police officer insisted with the questions, right? And I knew I couldn't, even in that moment where I was absolutely right, I knew I couldn't act, I couldn't get angry, I couldn't like I couldn't act out of like proportion. I had to stay calm I had to be respectful and like answer to all the question of the police officer. And I was also very lucky that that police officer was like, I would say a good person, because he took the time to like listen to me, and he responded to the manager of that, so that he cannot arrest me or do anything without clear like evidence of what they allegedly said happened. And from what the police officer even saw from the camera, it was clear that I wasn't with those people. I was just a person shopping in the store. But just because of the color, I mean, I would say because of the color of my skin, I was profiled. And when I went home that day, I started thinking of thousands of ways that like particular scene could have went wrong. And when I told that to my godparents, I mean, my godparents are white Americans. I love them to death. They have become like my family here in the US. They were shocked, and they immediately called that store and filed a complaint. And the reason we did that was because, I mean, I've read in the news, I've heard like a lot of stories of like, black people getting shot in the US by mistake, or people just like losing their life on things that are totally like not true. And I put like myself as a black person in that moment, and I started like thinking about what could have happened. I could have lost my life just because somebody perceived me as a threat in a store. I had to share like that story. And when I went back home, and like my godparent, like, I mean, they call like the store, they complain, and then a couple of days, like the next day, the store called anyway, like they apologize, and they say they clearly like reviewed the video. I was not implicated in that scene, and they're like really sorry. But I told them I'm not accepting your apologies, because I don't think they're sincere. I mean, I could have lost my life at that particular moment, and I don't think it would have changed anything for your store. And the reason why we actually bring this public is because not all black men have white godparents to call on their behalf to defend them. And it's really sad that it's happening like every day, and to like black people in this country.
I'm going to use the story that you shared, Jamal, to segue into the next question, because your experience, it's something that so many Black people in the US go through. But Amran, I want to ask you, given that your organization deals with creating spaces to have conversations about substance use disorders and mental health within the immigrant and BIPOC communities, what issues have you encountered that may not be very widely recognized, but that still deeply impact Black immigrants?
That's going to be a long answer, but I'm going to try and highlight a few things. So first and foremost, a lot of Black immigrants definitely struggle with mental health. So we work with our communities around mental health and substance use disorder, but a lot of communities, at least in Maine here, we don't get the culturally competent resources that we need. I think worldwide, there's definitely spaces where cultural competency is needed, because when it comes to immigrants, it's very much like, okay, here's your space, here's your resources, go at it, take it. But we're not given the luxury of like asking what these resources are, how are they going to help us, how are they equipped to help us. A lot of like people will give us resources. They'll be like, here's your translated resources, here you go. But they don't understand that some people might speak the language, but they're unable to read the language, or the translator that you're giving them is somebody from their community. Like they don't want this translator knowing their business, because they have that fear of people like other people hearing their business. I feel like, especially growing from like a Muslim immigrant community, Somali, people don't understand that there's this like labeling, or like this fact of like stigma, where there's that fear of people judging you. I think growing up within like these spaces, you grow up and you're told you're supposed to be a certain way, because your parents bring you to America to have that American dream, have that like they brought you here, they went through the struggle to make sure that you're good, you have these resources, but also, so like where are these struggles coming from? Where's this mental health coming from? But then you don't realize, like, people don't realize that everybody struggles with mental health. It might be hereditary, it might be something that you're going through, but families don't understand it, or they're not equipped to deal with it. And I think that's like all throughout America, but also obviously in other countries also. But people don't understand that there's not enough resources when it comes to mental health or substance use disorder. A lot of these spaces, people struggle with it, but it's like, oh, okay, it's just another youth who's gone off the rails, or another youth who's struggling. But people don't understand that our youth are human at the end of the day. They have the same struggles as other communities, maybe even more, and they deserve the same resources. They deserve the same culturally equipped things. But families don't understand what their kids are struggling with. Families don't understand how to get them these resources, and then you pile on that stigma, and it's like, what do we go? Where do we go from here? What do we do to get help? So I think there definitely needs to be more national resources when it comes to communities, because I hear all the time there are resources, but they're not culturally equipped. They're not here to help different communities. They'll be like, oh, here's your culturally competent resources, but they don't understand that all communities within just the immigrant communities are not the same. We all have different cultures, we have different ways of living, we have different ways that we deal with things. So they have to make sure that these resources are equipped to each person, each culture, each community individually. And at the end of the day, even if like we have two Muslim women in the room, each one needs different resources, and they need to be humanized. And people don't seem to understand that. They love to put people in a box and just, not understand that each person is an individual and they deserve the resources.
I feel like the topic of mental health and culturally competent care should be like a whole Refugee Matters episode in its own. So stay tuned. That may be coming in the future. Um, Jamal, your story of coming to the US was honestly very just eye opening and interesting to read. Your journey took you to 6 different countries. You were at the US Mexico border. You had to learn Spanish, fend for yourself because you didn't have any type of governmental assistance from either government. So, I want to ask you, from what you experienced, can you tell us some stories or examples that highlight the strength and resilience of Black immigrants in the face of systemic challenges and discrimination?
Um, yeah, thank you so much. I mean, today when I think about my journey experience, I can't even like believe that I actually went through all of these things. And just like small point of like correction, I didn't go through 6 countries. I went through I think 9. It was like more than 6 countries. So like basically through all Central America from Ecuador to the Mexican border. And it was tough. It was very tough. I mean, like here I was in a new world where, I mean, I had no one, I had no assistance. I didn't speak the language. I am a black person. I mean, I had all the odds against me, but despite all of this, like challenges and odds, I had to find that, like, that power in me to always, like, move forward and push forward. And which I did. And I was stuck at the U.S. Mexican border for 2 months and 3 weeks. I had no resources, like nobody to turn to or nowhere to go, and it was very hard. And during that time, I was very lucky to come across a legal aid nonprofit organization called El Ocho Lado, and through them I could receive this, legal aids and useful information that helped me to understand the law, know about like asylum, and safely cross the border and apply for asylum. And I and today I really like I came to the understanding that my story, like, I mean, my immigration like story is not like unique. Like there are a lot of people who go through like the same experience. But what I found to use with my own like personal experience is to use like my story as sort of like inspiration to others. When I could finally move into the US, I started. I mean, I came to the US at the worst period ever. It was during the pandemic, so I basically stayed 1 year in the house. I was isolated. I was renting a room at that time, and everything was different. Like the culture, the way people speak. So I basically had to like find like myself in this new world, and I used that particular time to start learning about technology, and I started like teaching like myself mobile technology and like different things. And I was very lucky to start working for a non-profit organization called Mobile Pathways. And when I started working with them, I then realized that they're actually working with El Ocho Lado, that non-profit that back in the days helped me to get all this useful information. So today I really use my experience and story to, like highlight like this, that despite like the challenges and everything that we might go through, there is always like the light at the end of the tunnel. If you work hard, if you persevere, and don't let all these external things change who you are as a person, I'm sure like you would find like that source and power in you to achieve what you want to achieve in life. And today, that is what I'm doing every single day with Mobile Pathways, and we're All America, and with other like nonprofit. Use my personal experience and all what I've learned to basically highlight and empower other immigrants.
Thank you for sharing more about your story, Jamal. And you are definitely right. The things that we hear from people and their journeys to come to the US, you really learn that it's a long journey, it's a difficult journey, and the amount of people that go through that to come here and have safety and better opportunities and a chance to live a dignified life, it's that pursuit is really priceless for so many individuals. I want to shift gears in our conversation a little bit, and I want to talk about relationships between Black immigrants and Black Americans in the US. So I'm just going to leave it broad like that. I want to give you guys the space to take the question in whatever direction you want and share, yeah, basically anything you want to say on the topic, because I'm sure you guys will have a lot to say.
I think growing up, I realized there was a slight division um, between Black immigrants and Black Americans. And I think realizing that there definitely has been a need to like break that division up and make sure that people are able to work together, because we're already struggling individually when it comes to racism, xenophobia, etc. So how is it that we're amongst ourselves as like Black people, we have that divide? I think like growing up within like the school system, I would notice that there would be like the immigrants sitting at one table, and then the people that were born here sitting, even like within like the Somali community, there'd be like the Somali people that were born here sitting at one table, and the ones that immigrated here like sitting at the other table. Like I think as we grew older, we all became more like together, but like as like at the beginning people would be like divided up. And I always wonder like what that division was, like why was that division? And it would always be like, oh, like we're just different, or like they're like fresh off the boat, which is like fobs shortened. And it's like, okay, but at the end of the day, everybody has been like new to the country. So like making sure that we're able to work together. I think as time has gone on, there have been like people working together and realizing we're human at the end of the day. We're all technically, there's no actual American. We're all Americans at the end of the day, as the show's called. We all immigrated here at one time. We all have had that struggle of immigrating, whether it was learning the language, and even if you were born here, it it shouldn't matter. There's a lot more I could say, but I'm gonna let you go, Jamal. Just
Thank you. Oh, that's a very good question. So I mean, from my observation, right, the relationship between like is very complex and in many layers. I mean, while we have this like shared instance of discrimination and like racism and like different things, we also have, I would say, like some moments of tension, right? And most of the tension mostly like arise due to ignorance. I would say, like, for example, I mean, I have a lot of like Black American friends, and we play soccer and do like many things together. Every time that we are having like this conversation about like immigration, I realize how little they know about like how the immigration system is even run in their own country. I like I realize how people don't even know what is going on at the border, and the where they take their information is not also the best way where you can get your information, because some of them get their information on like like mainstream line or some social like media and some like newspaper. And I mean, we know what some how some newspaper are depicting like the immigrant community in the United States. So this this like this ignorance is, I would say, is the main cause of tension, because every time that now during the condition I educate them and I kind of like tell them, oh, this is actually what is happening at the border, not only based on like my words but with like stats and facts, right? I can go online and show them, okay, I'm actually working in the immigration space, so I can factually tell you that this whatever like you're saying there is actually not true. And after that short conversation, you really see a change of mind, and like you really see like the change in the way that person perceive that community, and they immediately come to the realization that what was really creating that gap between them was only ignorance. So that's why education, 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 always like tell to people who you are, explain like to them, because we sometimes have like this, we sometimes make this mistake of assuming that the other person on the other side has a clear understanding or like knows about like the topic, but it's not always true. So that is my experience with like the topic.
Since we're good on time, I want to add a follow up question because I really find this topic very interesting. So, I immigrated to the US from Venezuela, and I also very much feel the disconnect that exists between US born Latinos or Latinos that grew up their whole lives in the US versus Latinos that immigrated later on in their lives. And I really just think it comes down to acknowledging what we've been saying for a lot of times in this episode, that our communities are not monolithic. That Latino culture, like, it looks very different depending on what country you are, but also how much time you have been living here in the US, and the exposure that you've had to more like Western culture, US individualism, all of these things. So I want to ask, in you guys' experience, what have been some moments or examples of bridging those cultural barriers within, whether it's like other Black immigrant communities or with Black Americans?
I think like growing up in the US, especially it being an individualistic society, realizing that back home, everybody kind of just relies on each other, works together. Like if you need somebody, like it's normal to like have someone hold your child for you and like not fear for their safety, because it's like as a community, you raise the child as a community. So growing up here, it's been very interesting to see like there's a lot of like individualism, like I'm doing this, you like stay in your lane kind of, but also seeing like the youth grow up and not know their own like cultures. It was like very interesting because even as I grew up, there was a lot of like culturally that I didn't understand or I didn't know, and I didn't take the time to learn about my own culture because I was like, oh, it's not that important right now, I'll learn about it later. Or it would be like, oh, I'm gonna go to school for this, like I don't need to like actually learn about. But then like as I grew up, I was like, wait, who am I then at the end of the day if I don't know where I come from or like who where like I like stem from, or where my family roots are from. So as I grew up and like started working with youth, a lot of them actually like knew their culture and knew who they were, and I was like, oh, okay, so maybe I should like learn. Like I kind of just like went off of them and learned more about my culture. But then also I realized like a lot of the youth were in the same like stage as I was, where they didn't understand who they were also. So I think we started kind of just understanding who we were and kind of just learning that, which is like one of the events that we did was a culture night. And a lot of the youth like loved it because they were able to embrace who they really were. They didn't have to be American. They didn't have like they are American, but at the end of the day, they got to understand where their family comes from, who they are. At the end of the day, like I am American, but I'm also Somali. I'm American, but I'm also Congolese. I'm American, I'm also this, you know? So they were able to understand their roots. And I think growing up, a lot of youth feel like, oh, if I like wear my cultural clothes or if I do this or I speak my language, people are going to look at me like funny because, oh, you're not American enough. And I think like we grow up wanting to be American enough and we forget that at the end of the day, nobody is fully going to be American enough because we all come from different communities. We all come from different cultures. And at the end of the day, your culture is what makes you who you are. And your roots, your grandparents, your family, your history is what makes you who you are. So learning that kind of just makes you understand who you are at the end of the day. So a lot of the youth have been embracing that. And that kind of has like uplifted me in a sense because it's been beautiful to see youth come in and like be talking to each other in their native language, even if it's broken. Like it's good to like practice it amongst each other. Like I'm gonna be honest, like my Somali is broken, but I'll still talk in it because I don't want to lose it, you know? So I think it's very important that like us as a community, we show our youth that your culture is beautiful. And if you were born here, you should still like learn about back home. Or if there's nothing wrong with somebody not knowing English, because that like they're once like people are like, oh, you only speak this language, but then also they speak that language and they speak a bunch of other languages. They just don't know English. So technically that makes them smarter than the person who only knows English. So people just don't seem to get that.
That was a beautiful reflection, Amran. Thanks for saying. And I mean, the name of our organization says it all. We're all America. There is no one right way that being an American looks like, and we're here to challenge that notion. Um, Djamal, I know you were a little bit hesitating whether you wanted to jump in or not, but just to say, the floor is yours if you have anything to add.
I mean, I'll just use a very like short example. So like last year I was working at a Giants store as like front end management, and in that store I used to encounter a lot of Latino speakers, and I used to work with some Latino speakers as well, and we had like many like instances where they felt ashamed not for speaking like like English like correctly, or even, and I was like, dude, my Spanish is broken. But every time that I speak with you, I think like the main thing is for you to understand the message, not for you to get like the words like by word. And I told to this friend, like, you should never be ashamed for not speaking the mother language of someone like else. You're already doing a lot of effort by learning the language, right? I mean, you have a lot of people in this country that only speak one like language. In my instance, for example, I was blessed that I speak about five languages. Even though I don't speak them like perfectly, I would never ever let anybody talk down on me for not like speaking like perfectly like their language, because at the end of the day it's not mine, it's it's like your language, right, that I learned to be able to communicate with you. So I always give this like message to my friend: never be ashamed of not like speaking like clearly, because of the at the end of the day you're trying your best.
Thank you guys for sharing your reflections and very uplifting messages that I think can be felt not just by Black immigrants, but immigrant communities across the board, period. Being proud of our heritage, of our culture, our languages, and holding on to that, even when we feel like there's this pressure to just assimilate and try to fit in as much as we can to make other people more comfortable around us. Our time of the episode is wrapping up, so I want to just open up the floor again for you guys to share a bit more about the work that your organizations are doing and if there's any initiatives that people can get plugged into.
Sure. So I'm the executive director of Generational Noor, which is an organization based in Maine that works with the immigrant and BIPOC community around substance use disorder and mental health. First and foremost, destigmatizing the conversation, but also having culturally competent resources. If you're a person of color and you work in counseling or work with mental health, substance use disorder, I would love to connect with you just to learn more about the work that you do, because there's not a lot of people of color who work in those spaces. But also, we have Instagram and a YouTube, same name, Generational Noir. So if you want to learn more about the work that we do, or if you want to start work similar in the state that you live in, please just follow us or watch our YouTube video. We have a podcast on there also. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll go next. I work as a program analyst for Mobile Pathways, which is a tech nonprofit, and we are the bridge connecting immigration, immigrant communities with the population like they served via trusted mobile technology. And this year, one of our exciting project, we created what we call an asylum navigator, which basically help asylum seekers know their odds of winning their case, their asylum case based on the state that they are and the judge that they they will appear. And this is just one of the many tools that we create at Mobile Pathways, and that we uh, we hang over and share with other nonprofit for free, so that they can actually reach the vast community of immigrants that they serve. So our website is mobilepathways.org. I encourage everyone to visit our website and to learn more about the work that we do and get involved in any capacity that you would want to. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining us for the episode, for giving us 37 minutes and 37 seconds of your time to share your experiences. And now it's my turn to share a little bit about We're All America. We have our first national webinar happening on March. And if you guys want to attend, it's going to be on appropriations and a briefing on the RCUSA Advocacy Days. You have the link at the bottom of the screen. But if you're just listening through audio, I'll say it regardless: www.bit.ly/NATLWEB1. And you can follow us on social media, across Instagram, We're All America, on Facebook, We're All America, and our website is weareallus.org, sorry. And you can subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated with our future events, future Refugee Matters episodes, and also just to know what other partners in the movement are doing and what's happening immigrations wise across different states. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you.